to talk a little bit about the world building and just kind of do a recap and lay out like what are we working here when it comes to time and space and all of that.
Real quick, I do want to say, because, dear God, the freaking world building terminology dump bomb that is dropped on you in the first 60 pages, it was like trying to learn Russian.
It's a
Okay,
lot.
it is a lot. So I did manage to find a Reddit forum where this girl kind of did exactly what you did, where she broke down the terminology and the world building to better understand it. So when we post this video, I'm going to link that in
Perfect.
our Instagram post for that week so people can actually find it and maybe help because I struggled with it. I had to
Yes.
keep going back and Googling things like, what was this again?
Yes, and
I'm on track now. 400 pages in, I'm on track now.
I love Reddit for that. I love a good fandom wiki. I love a good like
Yeah.
Reddit forum. And this uh, world is very uh, parallel or referential to the Roman Empire. It is not set in an ancient time, it's actually set in a modern time. Um, but it's very reminiscent of their societal structure. So it's interesting if you kind of, and it doesn't Moss has not said that, but if you look at kind of how things break down, there's that social kind of commentary that you can kind of see. So starting with we are set on the planet of Midgard, which is could be argued to be Earth. It is an Earth-like planet. We're in a contemporary world, so there's technology, there's cars, there's cell phones, smartphones, electricity, all of that. So like we're not in Akatar world where they're like they don't have plumbing and like you know
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And the population of this planet is both human and Vanir. And Vanir is the term that she uses to refer to any magical being. And all of the magical beings that live on Midgard are actually migrated here from other worlds through these dimensional rifts. And they're like wormholes or portals through space.
Yeah.
Um, and so at different points different races of Vanir have come over. So there's archangels, angels, fae, shifters of different types. We have wolves, but there's other types of shifters. There's also vampires and river spirits, and then there's people or beings with elemental magic. So, um, and again, this overview at the beginning is not going to be all encompass, but I'll explain anything that comes up that's like a new, you know, reference if need be for the plot. So
Yeah.
the protagonist, the overarching protagonist in this series is the Asteri. 15,000 years ago, seven Asteri are which are a powerful elite race come to Midgard and they take over the planet and they're like incredibly powerful, magical, more so than there's no fighting them or overpowering them. And even though humans were on this planet first, they are at the very bottom of society. They have no voice in their own government. They're treated like animals, basically, in terms of the way that
Lesser beings.
lesser beings, yes, absolutely. Um, and slaves are a thing here. Like people and certain magical creatures are literally bought and sold. So
Yeah.
there's definitely that is kind of the most obvious reference to like a Roman type society. And so magic. So the entire modern civilization structure that's built there, it runs on a power source that they call a first light, which is actually magic. Um, any magical being or Vanir, when they come of age, they go through a ritual called the drop, and in the drop they come into their full power, and that is the point where they become immortal. So they stop aging at that point. So usually, once a Vanir is like a full adult, and they can choose to do it whenever they want, but that's when this happens. When they do the drop, a portion of their power is siphoned off. That very first burst of magical power is siphoned off and donated like to society to power everything, and that's why it's called First Light. And
The drop confused me for a while. They just kept
yes,
mentioning the drop, but there was no details on the drop for like 30 pages, and I was like, what the hell
what does
is
that even
this?
mean? And as we get farther into it, when they talk about the actual mechanics of the drop, it's even more to wrap your mind around. So we won't even go there yet. um, and within Midgard, there's a couple continents that get referenced. Pangea is a continent. It's a different continent than where this takes place. Um, and Valbara, which is where we are in the city of Lunathian. And as a comparison, think of Lunathian as like New York City. It's a big
Yeah.
metropolis. It's actually on the seaside. Um, it's divided into like New York is divided into boroughs: Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens. Um, so is Lunathian.
I'm
And
glad you made that comparison because the whole time I was reading it and like referencing back to the map, I was like, yeah, this feels very New Yorky.
yes, and it's probably another reason I love it so much because I love New York. But something that can be confusing also is that Crescent City is the same thing as Lunathian. It's like a nickname. So, like we call New York the Big Apple. And it's just because the river that goes through Lunathian shaped like a crescent the way it comes through the city. So, it's just a nickname. But the districts in this city are really divided by race, not entirely, but mostly. So you've got the central business district, and that's like where the primary seat of government is. The governor, who is an archangel. There's an archangel in charge of each territory in this world. And so then you've got Moonwood, which is the wolves. Uh, the prime of the wolves is what leads Moonwood. And Five Roses is the Fey district, so the Autumn King rules over that. The meat market is actually kind of a melting pot of, it's not a race specific territory, but it's ruled over by the Viper Queen. And they make a quick reference to it in these 40 chapters that we've covered today, but I'm going to go
Mhm.
ahead and say so the Viper Queen has a specific venom that is addictive. And so when somebody goes to be like in her mafia, for lack of
Mhm.
a better term, they have to drink her venom and they immediately become addicted to it. So they're like all like incredibly loyal to her because they are addicted to her venom.
It
Um,
made me think of True Blood
yeah, I could see that. I could see
in the
that.
way that the vampire blood in the show was addictive and used as like a drug. I was like,
Yes. Yes,
okay.
exactly. And the meat market is also kind of what it sounds like. You can get anything, drugs, people, sex, whatever. It's kind of like an underbelly type area. Um, the old square is like a historic downtown area. That's where the Oracle is and is kind of in charge of that area. And that is kind of an area that beholdens back to like the ancient times of this area before the Vanir were there and they had temples, all this kind of stuff. Um, the Bone Quarter is actually it's ruled over by the Underking, and it's like where the dark creatures and magic and all of that is. Um,
Yeah.
and then the House of Many Waters, or sometimes referred to as the Blue Court, is the actual uh, part of the city that's underwater in the river, and that's ruled over by the River Queen. And then Asphodel Meadows is the human district, and they don't have a leader. They have absolutely no representative in government. Um, and I'm
They're
I
so oppressed that they don't need one.
well, yeah, it wouldn't they wouldn't even be referenced. Give me okay. So one thing I want to explain too is that the kind of law enforcement government structure is something you have to kind of understand because this is a murder mystery. We're immediately thrown into solving a murder. And the triari is what they call their like military, which is led by the governor, and those are made up of angels. And then you have the city law enforcement, which is called the Ox or the Auxiliary. And there is a Fey Ox and there is a Wolf Ox. And they are like your city police versus
Yeah.
the Angels are like the National Guard, basically. Um, so that's all like perfectly crystal clear, right?
Mm, no.
um,
It's so much information just thrown at you. Most of it isn't immediately explained. It's just using the terminology without the explanations, which is why it feels like you're trying to learn a new language without knowing the language.
yes. So this is I've seen so many funny TikTok videos or memes about when you're at the beginning of a fantasy and they're speaking basic gibberish. This is like that. You're just
Yeah.
dropped right in the middle of it. Um,
Yeah.
I
Like you
feel,
should know.
yeah, like you missed something. So I totally, yes, agreed. So in this world that I've just described, our main character is Bryce Quinlan. She is half Fae, half human, and she is immediately devastated by the murder of her best friend Danica Fendir, who is a wolf shifter. And through a series of circumstances, she is forced to team up with the governor's personal assassin, who is a fallen angel named Hunt Athalar. And they are charged with finding the person responsible for Danica's murder. Um, they also have to help find an ancient magical artifact that was stolen days before her murder and is to believed to be connected to the murders somehow. Both Bryce and Hunt have suffered a devastating loss in their past, and this is you kind of see them. They're forced to kind of cope with their own trauma and their own shit as they learned how to work with each other and try to put all the pieces together um, to try and solve this murder and obviously stop them from continuing to happen.
Akatar happens in the same universe, but on a different planet,
Yes.
but
It
around the same time period.
yeah, it happens technically like after all the events of Akatar, but not very. long after. It's not like hundreds of years later or anything like that.
That's that's really that's really weird because this one is so advanced and like a more futuristic, whereas the other one is like medieval times.
So, yeah, this society or this world is a lot more advanced than the planet that Akatar takes place on. And we don't actually see how they exist in the same universe until the third book in this series. But
Interesting.
it definitely shows up. Like, it's not subtle, is what I'll say. It's, you'll know 100. It's not like a reference to, oh, that makes sense, like backstory or whatever. Like, no, it's gonna hit you like right in the face.
If I get Resand in the third book, I may gasm.
I,
It's it's kind of confusing though,
yeah,
but
it's definitely
I can see
not,
how that would work.
it's not clear at all, because there's a lot of different, there's the actual history, there's also what the Asteri allow
Laos.
to, which goes into that secret library of Jessica's,
Yeah.
because it contains information, parts of their history that the Asteri have not wanted to allow future generations to know.
It kind of reminds me of a City of Ember. Did you ever read or watch that?
No.
You have got to. It would be a short read. It's a YA book,
Uh huh.
but you should read it. It's essentially the same thing except for in that book the world is ending, so they kind of shove everyone underground into like these massive bunkers that take up so much space or whatever, but they were supposed to have a plan to get out because the generators and all of the like sustainable things were going to run out, things were going to stop working. So there was a date that they were supposed to release from this, but the council was hiding all of these secrets. The governor was hiding all of these secrets to keep people underground because he got to control it. It
Mm,
was, yeah,
yeah.
like history was wiped clean. Everybody thought that if they walked out, they would die. And there was like no way to get out. It was a secret. It was in a box that was going to open on a certain day. And when it did, it would give you the escape route for everyone to take to get out.
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to add
And
that.
then these kids find it. It's really good. But I I like that I can have all of these like theories on how Akhtar is going to show up because they are pretty much immortal. So like even if this was like 100 years later, they're all still going to be alive.
Yeah.
And this book did mention portals to like other worlds and other planets.
Yes.
So I need to know if we figure out who
Yeah.
create how the cauldron was created.
This book is the portals in the northern and the southern rift mentions that they uh, are portals to other dimensions, but we only ever see it open to hell. But what we do find out in this book is that hell is not like a mythical place here. It's an actual planet. It's another planet.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because that distinction does get made.
I don't know if you can answer this right now or if it shows up in another book, but I need hell more deeply explained because if when you die, you either go to the boneyard or you end up in the Istros, or you end up in some infinite place of nothingness forever, then do any of them go to hell?
So
Like, what's the point of hell
hell
if you don't go to it?
is not a religious or uh
It's not a damning
it's not a
place.
damning place. It's not even a like mythical place. It's or a spirit world. It's just another planet with a different
It's another planet
hierarchy,
that went to hell.
and that's basically like all demons and
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
that makes more sense.
yeah.
Because I had that thought reading this book. I was like, but how does that? Okay, so maybe it's just my small town brain trying to work that out. But
Yeah.
that makes sense.
But the fact that this book is sectioned into the different layers of hell is something that I actually did not catch until we I was preparing for these episodes, and I had made a note of that quote of them kind of explaining the different layers of hell, and that's when I
Hmm.
realized this book is sectioned into the sections of hell. And so, and that
I
doesn't,
didn't know that till you pointed it out.
it's definitely something that I want to continue as we continue through the next books to pay attention to, because I feel like there's going to be more parallels.